You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, I'm Helen Mackenzie, and today is Friday, May 27th, 2022.
6.
In these times of price increases and inflation, procurement are the people being relied upon to keep costs down. And while we can all come up with new and different ideas to do this, sometimes it's good to start with basic category tactics and work from there. Here are 3 questions to ask yourself. Can you consolidate spend or suppliers or both? Can you adjust your volume mix across multiple suppliers? Can you substitute your current product or service for something new? For a helpful roundup of expense reduction tactics, check out the Art of Procurement cheat sheet using the link in the show notes.
5.
In this week's podcast, Philip Hydson was joined by Zendesk's Rendy Miller on site at ProcureCon Indirect West event in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, Rendy is the Vice President of Strategic Sourcing and Procurement at Zendesk, and she's a passionate supporter of the procurement community as a whole. Now, the podcast is full of great insight into what it takes to deliver a fantastic procurement experience for our stakeholders. And one of the things I found really interesting was Rendy's proactive approach to getting in front of stakeholders and developing influence and getting that much talked about seat at the table.
And we used to always say, we're fighting for a seat at the table. How do you get a seat at the table? How many conferences did we go to? And there were sessions on getting a seat at the table. Yeah. And I said, I've told my team, we need to set the table. Yeah. We need to be the ones who are arranging the dinner party and, inviting the guests in and saying, this is the agenda. This is what we're serving today. And, really, we need to create that type of environment rather than waiting to be asked. And I think that is a lot more meaningful and goes a lot farther in creating that partnership with our stakeholders.
Yeah, I love that, because a lot of times they don't know what to expect. So exactly. What they think they should expect from us is what the experience they've had before, which may have been a negative one, or what they've perceived as being the role of procurement because that's what we've projected for so many years.
Yeah. Well, I think too, when they think we're not buying anything right now, so we don't need procurement at the table with us. And so we're just talking about what we're going to do. Yeah. And if we don't understand what they're talking about or what they want to do, when we get brought into, because now they want to buy something, it's like, well, why? What's the plan here? What's the strategy? Why are you buying this? What do you need it for? What is it going to do? So, like I said, I think setting that table and bringing them to us and making sure that we're all engaged, setting those agendas, is going to go a lot farther.
Great advice from Rendy. Time to get setting that table. You can hear the full conversation between Rendy and Phil in the latest Art of Procurement episode, wherever you choose to listen to your podcasts.
4.
We recently published an event recap paper that summarises the Digital Outcomes event that we held in March. Now, I was delighted to host a session with Zip Intake to Procure's Colin Glazier, where we talked about the tendency for procurement to be a roadblock rather than an enabler for our stakeholders. Now, Colin had 3 tips for us to help keep things flowing, which we've shared in the paper. 1. Create a transparent process to increase understanding and inform requesters. In my experience, the more the stakeholder understands the process, the better things go. 2. Make sure they know when procurement is the roadblock and when an approver is. Now, sometimes the stakeholder's actually in a better position to get that approval than we are. So if we know that the hold-up is them and we can communicate that to the stakeholder, then perhaps they can help. 3. Simplifying and streamlining the intake process to alleviate any friction that remains, automate the workflows that stem from it. For every step in the process, ask the question, is this adding value? How's this managing risk? Now, getting rid of a few unnecessary steps could make all the difference. And for more insight from Colin and from Digital Outcomes, head on over to the free resources at artofprocurement.com.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
The 2022 Supply Chain and Procurement Awards took place last week, and one of the highlights for me was the contribution made by Tim Nelson, CEO of Hope for Justice. Now, Hope for Justice exists to bring an end to modern slavery by preventing exploitation, rescuing victims, restoring lives and reforming society. And you would think that this powerful mission was enough on its own, but the ability to communicate that mission is equally important. And Tim's extremely engaging and impactful presentation reminded me of the importance of effective communication in all that we do. So whether we're communicating about an issue that is world-changing, like putting something into our contracts to prevent modern slavery, or working with a stakeholder to have a conversation about our process, here are a few pointers that the late Professor Patrick Winston published that we can use. 1. Ask, how much does my audience know? Don't patronise them by talking down to them, but don't baffle them with terms and acronyms they've never heard of. A bit of thought before you engage with them can make all the difference. 2. Get excited. Now that's not a hard one for me, particularly when I'm talking about procurement, but even I have days when I'm not fired up and ready to go. Remember why you're communicating with them and the value that can be delivered. And thirdly, slow down. Now, although the advice is to be passionate and enthusiastic, that doesn't mean you need to garble on. Take your time and stop and listen if your stakeholder has something to say. Now, communication is a key capability for procurement. Let's all take the time to improve so that we can deliver our message as effectively as Tim did it at the awards.
2.
Just when you think things might be settling down, there's another supply chain risk to take into account. Amongst the impacts arising from changes in the climate, extreme weather events are becoming more prevalent. So are you and your suppliers prepared? Alongside the usual tips to map supply chain and collaborating with suppliers, we're now seeing an increase in the use of technology in this risk management process. Analysing and simulating the impacts on different supply networks is now being undertaken using computer modelling. And data insights are also helping to put measures in place to allow things to return quickly to normal after a weather event, which limits profit loss and maintains market share. So, it looks like having that data capability is a must for organisations from now on.
1.
We're delighted to announce that Art of Procurement is expanding the network that supports our Experts on Demand advisory business. So, if you're an independent subject matter expert with deep domain experience in an indirect procurement category, we'd love to hear from you. Use the link in the show notes to apply.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.